Welcome to the Inside the Box podcast. I am your host, Hans Zappin, and I am thrilled to be joined in studio by three gentlemen who know far more about the subject that we're going to be talking about today than I do. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more. But I'm joined in studio by Roger Wise Jr., Jimmy Moore, and Elwyn Gaissert to talk to us a little bit more about the Alpharetta Ed Isakson Family YMCA. I think it's Ed Isakson Alpharetta Family YMCA, actually.
That's correct.
So I'll go ahead and correct the record right off the bat.
Yeah, that's correct.
But I'm excited about the show. So, gentlemen, just so you know, this is the first show where we're going to be sort of profiling a nonprofit. Typically, we'll have somebody in here and they'll tell us about their life story, how they came to be in their current elected position or business position, or we're talking about a specific topic, some sort of current event. So this is the first show where we're actually going to be profiling a nonprofit, and I don't think there's a better nonprofit we could be kicking off with other than this one. And just for our listeners that have been loyal to this show, just so you know, in full disclosure, I am the current chairman of this year's Ed Isakson Alpharetta Family YMCA Board of Directors. And we've been throwing in some plugs throughout our fundraising campaigns on this podcast, actually raised a little bit of money. So I thought what we would do in sort of the same vein of what we do at our board meetings is introduce ourselves by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, but then also your connection to the YMCA. And the reason behind that is it's one of the things we do at our board meetings that I think makes our board so special, and that is we'll have somebody from the community come in, or somebody who's a member of the Y or another board member tell their Y story is what we call it. And that can involve somebody who has learned to swim at the Y or has had foster kids at the Y, and just really explained why this organization is so important to them. So let's go ahead and kick that off. Elwyn, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your Y story?
Yes, Hans, I appreciate it. And thanks for having us today, by the way. Well, my name is Elwyn Gaissert. I grew up in the Roswell, Georgia area, kindergarten, grammar school, and high school right there, and then off to the University of Georgia. And then it was join to be drafted time, so I put myself up for the naval aviation training and was selected and did that for 7.5 years. And then I got out and sold my knowledge to the airlines. So I was very blessed. I grew up here knowing a lot of people. It was very small at the time, probably 2,300 people in Roswell itself, much smaller North Fulton, Alpharetta area the same way. And when I came back, I said, I'm going to raise my family here, wife, two daughters. And it turned out that I joined the Roswell Rotary Club. There I met a lot of wonderful men and later on wonderful women in 1988 when they came into the fold, which was a wonderful thing to happen to the Rotary. The idea was hatched by three Rotarians: Hal Powell, who grew up in the YMCA and knew a lot of the programs and a lot of the activities that was there; Lou Marshall, another Rotarian who had a heart for people, particularly children who were disadvantaged. And we had a number of them here in the North Fulton area at that time. And then they asked me to come in, and we had a formation meeting, the three of us. And we talked about it and said, yes, I think we can do it. But
it being a YMCA.
It being a YMCA, that's right. And we said, there's nothing north of Buckhead that would take care of us. And then we met with the Metropolitan Atlanta YMCA membership people, and they said, I think it'd be a wonderful thing. So as it transpired and we jumped through the hoops, we started working on this in 1981. 1982, we actually formed a preliminary board of directors and local people, and we used people in Alpharetta and Roswell. There was no Johns Creek. There was no Milton.
Sandy Springs.
Sandy Springs was there, but they actually started going to the Ashford Dunwoody YMCA, which was a little more convenient for them. Mm-hmm. But we started with just minimal items. There was a location on Alpharetta Highway down in Roswell, Georgia, and it was called Fulton Federal Savings and Loan. With that, again, growing up here, had some connections with people, went in there and asked, I said, look, do you have a space that we can just kind of hang our hat for a little bit, have small board meetings, because we weren't really that organized yet, kind of get some ideas. So they were very gracious and put us downstairs. It was a windowless room, and we started forming the Y at that point in time. We had no telephone, we had no budget, we had ideas, but we had a lot of connections, and that's what really turned us on.
Okay. So your why story is literally the formation of a new Y.
Absolutely. I barely could spell YMCA. And I won't say that I was product of public education, but yes, I was. But it was one of these wonderful things that I said, you know what, having daughters here, I knew a little bit about the Indian guides and Indian princesses that the Y did. And let's be honest, there was a wonderful Recreation and Parks Department in Roswell, Georgia at the time. Really well done, well run. We wanted to be something in addition to the Y being mind, body, and spirit. We thought we could be in addition to that too. And we still believe that to this day.
I love it. Yeah. Well, Jimmy, what about you? Tell our listeners a little bit about your history and what you're all about.
Well, I actually grew up in the Macon Y, which is no longer there, by the way. Learned how to swim, played racquetball, basketball, participated in High Y, which was the high school equivalent to Interact, and in Macon, and also in senior high, and moved off after I got out of college, and spent the majority of my career in HR. And in 2008, I semi-retired and started a consulting firm doing nothing but HR work for physicians' office and hospices. And I was approached by one of my clients who was on the board of the Y in Tifton. He said, the Tifton Y has been here for 9 years. We've had 9 CEOs, and we want some stabilization. Will you come in and take over? And after some deliberation, I decided to take it on. And I took it under the premise that we become a real Y, not just a gym. And the first program we started was a Christmas program where we went out and got contributors to get a clothing hamper and get clothes, underwear, socks, shoes, and toys. And we had 75 kids that we did Christmas for the first year. Second year, we did 150. Third year, we did 225. But during that time, we also found out that YUSA was starting a program, a summer feeding program. There were 5,000 kids in Tift County that were part of the free and reduced lunch program. And my program director, who is now in charge of the whole feeding program for YUSA, by the way, she and I got together and we got a gentleman from ABAC, wrote a grant, and we got the grant. And the first year we served 38,000 meals. And these are kids that would not normally be eating in the summertime. And we were the third largest feeding program in the nation. Keep in mind, we were one of the smallest Ys in the nation. We had less than 1,000 members. And then the second year, we expanded into Turner County, and we served 58,000 meals. And at that time, we were the largest feeding program in the nation. Well, because of this, we got a lot of attention from YUSA. Some of the members of the staff from the Atlanta Y, including Dan Powell, were coming down to see what we were doing. And they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I came up here and got it started up here. And the beauty of it was, after we got it started up here, the branches took over the program. We're doing, out of the Isakson branch, we're doing the Aspen Point still. And it's just a wonderful program because there's 600,000 kids in metro Atlanta that are part of free and reduced lunches. So each one of our branches are now doing the feeding programs, except now instead of just summer, they're doing them year round, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I love it. then started the radio station.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're kind of used to being behind the microphone with some headphones on.
Yeah, I've always said I don't have the face for TV, and I certainly don't have the voice for radio, but I've got the passion.
Sure. Well, tell us more about that. How can tell us more about it and how listeners can find it?
Oh, it's easy to find. You go to ymcaatlanta.org/radio, and it's 24/7, 365 days a year. We play oldies in the morning. We play new music in the afternoon and R&B at night. We play Christian music from 12 to 1, then we start over again. And on the weekends, we play classic rock, and we play Carolina Beach music on Sundays. The beauty of it is on every third song, there's an why impact story. It's not about the gym. It's about what we're doing to impact people's lives every day. So every third song, there's an impact story. And they're not just about the Atlanta why, they're about all the whys, every YouTube video that we can get from other whys and any other stories that other whys send us, we play them. And that's my why story, because each one of these stories just fills your life with the passion of helping other people. It's like the Rotary motto, service above self. And really that's what we do at the Y. It's all about helping other people.
Absolutely. And I do want to talk more about that, and I want to have us discuss some of our favorite why stories and whatnot. But before we do that, I want to jump to our third panelist. And now, Roger, we've only got a certain amount of time, but I do want you to introduce yourself in your history here in the Alpharetta-Roswell area. And part of the reason we need to do that is because this podcast is listened to in all 50 states. So if you're listening here in Georgia, there's no way you don't know Roger. But Roger, for our listeners that aren't in Georgia, tell us a little more about you and your why story.
Thank you very much. My why story, I grew up in eastern North Carolina, and we had a Y in Goldsboro, North Carolina. That's where I learned to swim and do a lot of other stuff. And they had a branch for the young boys, and we went to summer camps, and we did this and that and the other. I had great parents, but we did not have large financial means, and there's a lot of stuff that helped me make me who I am today that I would have never had the opportunity to participate in had it not been for the Y. So when I got up here, I spent 30 years with Abbott Laboratories, regulatory affairs, government relations. As you know, I'm somewhat active in the community.
Just a little bit.
And have been for many, many years. And my agenda has always been health care for children, education, and veterans. When I got out of the Army, I was offered a job with Abbott. And I took the job because a guy said, this is in Florida. And I said, okay, I'll take the job. He says, well, don't you want to know what it pays? I said, mister, I ain't never been to Florida. I'll take the job. So that's how I got to Florida. Well, when I got up here and got active in the community, I met Johnny Isakson. Johnny is a great public service. Also met Jim Cowart. Jim Cowart is was a great individual. YMCA was big on Jimmy's mind. He gave a lot of land to build YMCAs. So Johnny one day came up to me and said, you need to talk with Mayor Chuck Martin. He'd just been elected mayor of Alpharetta. Said they're talking about wanting to build a Y north of the river. Everything was north of the river. So I got involved. We started working on it. And I had a children's charity golf classic every year. And this was 1999. The Roger Wise Jr. Children's Charity Golf Classic. And it was benefiting the building of the Ed Isakson Alpharetta YMCA. So we had the classic. We raised some money, and we presented Dan Powell with a check. And we took what Elwyn had. It was his idea. He started the ball rolling. We took it and continued to roll it. and built what we have today. And I ask everyone, go over there and just watch what's going on. You watch those young kids running around that pool, and you watch those young kids running outside, having fun, and you know that what you've done is God's work. So we have the Ed Isakson Alpharetta YMCA, something we can be so proud of, and I am privileged to have been part of the process in making that happen.
So far, our listeners that may not be familiar with the YMCA are probably starting to get the idea that there's a little bit more to the YMCA than swim and gym.
That's exactly right.
So do you guys want to touch on just a little bit about maybe some of your favorite programming or some of the things that these community-based YMCAs are able to do in the area and why they're so much more than just a swim and gym?
One of the things that I'm really passionate about is our after-school program. Our after-school program, we are in every grammar school. For the next school year, we'll be in every grammar school in North Fulton except for 4. And what we do is the bell rings, they come directly to us, and they're there till 6 o'clock. This gives them a time to study, a time to build character, a time to learn life, and a time to have fun.
And stay out of trouble in a lot of cases.
And stay out of trouble. And the neat thing about it to me is that if you can't afford to go, we scholarship you to come. So the underprivileged kids that we serve in North Fulton are amazing. I mean, there are like 2,000 kids that get to take advantage that would not normally get to take advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Working closely as I do, as you know, with children at all levels, the idle mind is a devil's workshop. What you do, Jimmy, is so important because it keeps them occupied. It keeps them moving in the right direction. And you're keeping a lot of children out of trouble.
And in many families' cases, it allows mom or dad, to keep working so they don't have to be home.
That's exactly right.
From their jobs at 3 o'clock whenever school gets out. And a lot of parents that have kids in that program are, they'll continue work until 5:30, 6 o'clock, or in some cases they're moving on to their second job, or in some cases their third job.
And
These kids want to have a belonging somewhere. It'll either be a good belonging or a bad belonging, and they will look for people for leadership, and we want to give them the most positive leadership possible.
And that's one of the great things is the leadership that they get from regular teachers and counselors that we have. I mean, they're teaching character that they may not get at home. And they're learning how to deal with ups and downs in a constructive way and not a destructive way. And, the thing is it costs a lot of money for us to be able to do this. It's about $220,000 for our whole program. Just in Roswell alone is $75,543.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy, you're investing $75,000 in Roswell?
In Roswell.
Well, I say, Roswell, let's help them with that investment.
It's amazing the response that we get in Roswell sometimes. The Y was formed out of the Roswell Rotary, but the majority of our support comes from everywhere but Roswell.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're trying to do is educate a lot of the people in Roswell on what we're actually doing and how we are involved in Roswell. We are very much in Roswell and making a dent on the future. We're working with their kids and just $75,000 in pure scholarships. That's not including the kids that can afford to go.
Right. Do you have some of those numbers in front of you, Jimmy? The number of schools and the number of students that participate in those after-school programs?
I don't have the number of students.
I think it's 2,200 ballpark.
Ballpark.
Okay.
But Esther Jackson, Finley Oaks, Hembry Springs, Mimosa is $20,597 just for that. Vickery Mill is 18,444. Then we're at Sweet Apple and River Eves and Northwood, just in Roswell. And then the list goes on forever in North Fulton.
Right.
Jimmy, that's important because a lot of people don't know, or maybe they don't want to recognize the need that we have in the greater North Fulton area. The children we have that need this type support.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
And I'll jump in and give maybe one of my favorite events that the Ed Isakson Alpharetta YMCA puts on every year, and that is the MLK Day sandwich making event that we do.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It is absolutely amazing. I took my 4-year-old daughter this year. We do it on MLK Day, and it benefits homeless folks. And the community puts together sandwiches for these folks every year. And the event continues to grow and grow and grow. I think we had 700 volunteers, ballpark, make about 10,000 sandwiches. And they just ran out recently of those sandwiches. So we're...
and actually, there was another site that contributed
That's
about
right.
4,000
Was that
more.
the Amana Academy?
I believe
Put that
that's
one on?
correct.
So that's one of my favorite events that we do as well. Roger, Elwyn, you want to...
I was going
Any
to say,
favorites?
I like where you brought your child into it too. You were showing them what it is to be service.
She put the
So
gloves
started-
on,
Yeah,
started making the sandwiches,
absolutely.
starting to understand.
Starting to know what it is to help, and that feeling you get from helping somebody that can use a hand up, not a handout, but a hand up, is a wonderful feeling. And I'm glad the Y can provide that service.
Elwyn, that is called psychic income. It is more important than money. Working with the student leadership groups, I tell them there is no me in your vocabulary anymore. It's all we, because we can do more than me.
That is correct, Roger.
And I also tell them that when they get on a team doing good civic stuff, doing good stuff outside the box, there is no I in team. And you get paid for paying your civic rent. And you get paid in psychic income. And when you're doing those type things, and I compliment you for taking your kid over,
Yeah.
because they grow up with that, and it becomes part of their nature. And they know that they're paying their civic rent, and they get paid with psychic income. And I suggest to each one in the class that I'm talking to that I want them to be millionaires in psychic income by the time they die.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, I took her, she was making the sandwiches. We had the, YMCA song going the whole time, and she's talking with folks, standing at the table, and she comes home, is telling mommy all about it, and her little 2-year-old brother all about it. So I have a feeling we're going to be back next year. I think she may insist on it, actually. So that's one of my favorite events that we do. But I want to maybe go back in time just a little bit and talk a little bit more about the formation of this Y, because I think the opportunity to have you guys in this room together at one time talking about it, it's I can't pass that up. Elwyn, you want to talk a little bit more about just forming an organization from the ground up and some of the difficulties you saw along the way in convincing folks about the value of the mission and everything?
Absolutely, Hans. It was a little bit of a struggle. I'll be perfectly honest. Roswell did have a very strong, and still does, very strong Recreation and Parks Department. I believe it was Alpharetta. I believe that it was a one-man operation, if I remember correctly. Mike Jackson, during the early periods of Alpharetta, the boom had not hit here yet. So he was basically a one-man operation up here. He was ready for anything we could provide and help and be a supportive individual for. Roswell, in all honesty, they met with us numerous times. The biggest concern was that the Y was going to come up and take over the soccer program, which was completely untrue. But when you have volunteer coaches and people start talking and one thing leads to another, rumors spread. It wasn't true. Fortunately, cooler heads prevailed. There were some wonderful people at the time. Dr. Clint Lavender, who was a veterinarian in Roswell at the time. I was sitting across the table like I am from Roger right now. And we were listening to these conversations going on. And he just kind of gave me the come hither with let's go outside. And we
Gotten that look before.
Yeah. And we said, this is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for the Y. I'm embarrassed for Roswell. We can do better. We know we can. And under his leadership and direction, we did. And we came in with no problem. We didn't take anybody's kids. All the kids could freely go wherever they wanted to participate. We had people in Martin's Landing that provided a field. We sent volunteers out there. I had a friend at the airline who had a front-end loader. He came out there and helped level the property. Didn't charge us a dime. We fed them a little bit of hamburgers, hot dogs, to kind of encourage people, keep their strength up. But people, the kids like yours, were out there helping pick up rocks, level that, and they played soccer for the first time over there from the YMCA. We had the same thing happen up in Crabapple, over in OC community. We were starting to branch out. We still did not have a physical location. You could come to this little windowless office at the Fulton Federal Savings and Loan on Alpharetta Highway, and that's where we were. We started saying, okay, we need to expand our area here a little bit. So we came up to Alpharetta. People, you're going to recognize some of these names. Mr. Robert Aiken here in Alpharetta, Mr. Larry Covington over on Freemanville Road, Mr. Bradley Curtis, another name, Connie Pence at the time, Roger Perot, who was down here, and Jimmy Phillips, named former mayor here. It was just a list of people who knew people who understood what the WISE programs were, saw them as an asset, and said, yes, we want to have a buy-in on this. It really made it kind of easy. I mentioned that I flew for an airline. Unfortunately, it was not based here in Atlanta, so I had to commute. So my time became more limited when I had to leave and go to different places, do my trips, and then come back here. But I believed in the Y. I believed in the WISE program so much that I contacted the Fulton County Schools, the PTA. They gave me a book of all the schools here in the Fulton County area, particularly North Fulton, the principals, and I contacted them to get to who the PTA presidents were at the time. That was before it was PTSA now. Mm-hmm. And they allowed me and other representatives from the Y to come in at their meetings and just give a 2 to 3 minute thumbnail sketch. This is who we are. We're the YMCA. We don't have a physical building you go to. We don't have a swimming pool. But here are the programs that we have. And we had people like Ernie Johnson. People know about Ernie Johnson with the Atlanta Braves, and a Major League Baseball player himself, played in 2 World Series. We had a roast, and he was the roastee.
He's the recipient.
He was the recipient. Very well received, good-natured. Our first mailing, and we thought 12,000 people. That was basically the area up here at the time. Sure. And our first mailing was 12,000 people. What we're trying to do now is capitalize on what's going on with the Y, the Ed Isakson and Alpharetta Family YMCA. And we don't want to get hung up on a name. We love Ed Isakson. We love Johnny Isakson. Ed, I happened to be in the Roswell Rotary Club and felt strongly with this. But it's not just that nucleus that got it going. It is now spread for the whole community, the Miltons, the Johns Creeks, the Alpharettas. It's all right there, and people are participating, and we're happy about that. So, again, I think it was not necessarily movers and shakers, but people who believed in the program's why and its activities.
Well, you rattled off kind of a who's who of the North Fulton, the history of North Fulton, and I think anytime you're building an organization from the ground up, and I have experience in that as well, in helping to form the Alpharetta Chamber of Commerce a few years ago. getting buy-in from community leaders is extremely important. And you mentioned that, the rumors flies. So, it's important to manage the message and keep people informed on what's going on. And Roger, you mentioned earlier Jim Cowart and Johnny Isakson, their involvement in the formation of this organization. Could you expand on that just a little bit about who those two people and their families are and what they mean to this area?
Well, Jim Cowart was a major developer, and I had the pleasure, I reckon it was a pleasure for 10 years, being Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Commissioner in Fulton County. At that time, everything up here north of the river was unincorporated, so it was controlled by Fulton County government. That's how I met Jim, and I was so impressed with him because he was very low profile, but he was as honest as the day is long. His heart was big as all outdoors. He and Ed Isakson worked on a lot of projects together. He had watched Johnny literally grow up, and of course Johnny became a state representative. Then he went on to be a congressman, and now he's one of our United States senators. So his family, the Isakson family and the Cowart family, they really believed in WISE. And I think you mentioned earlier the Ashford Dunwoody YMCA. Jim Cowart gave them the land if they would build the building.
I believe that land was his family's.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Cowart's family had land all over everywhere. I mean, I would go to Jim on a project and he said, "Let me check and see." Well, yeah, I think we got a 5 or 6 acre plot there if you need it. I mean, his family had land all over everywhere.
It's nice to know folks like that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. But he was always, so when they had the why where they had it, and they were doing some great stuff. But people kept coming up and saying, "When are we getting a swimming pool? Why don't we have a swimming pool? Why don't we have a basketball court?" So they said, "Okay, let's build a building. Let's build a building." And Jim Cowart and Ed Isakson were two of the first. Said, "Let's build a building." So Cowart found the land. You mentioned Jimmy Phillips. Jimmy was mayor of Alpharetta at the time. Also, the Greater North Fulton Chamber of Commerce. So those guys got together and started calling in some chits, talking to some friends. And lo and behold, next thing you know, we're moving forward. And we had the coming soon announcement. And then we started taking money in. And it was wonderful watching it mature, watching it come forward. But it would have never happened had you, Ira, and your group sat down and said, "We want a Y north of the river."
Well, we had a lot of encouragement. The name Chatham is synonymous with building in this community. David Chatham and Howard Chatham, his father, were very supportive of the Y, and David served on the Y board. And he started looking in the mid to late 80s for property in unincorporated North Fulton, in Roswell, in the Alpharetta area. But that was just right on the cusp of everything starting to explode around here, starting to go, and the prices were starting to go up, up, up. And we didn't have a whole lot to put forward. We had not had a campaign yet to raise funds because we could not say this is where it's going to be. We did not have that luxury. I'm glad it took place, but I'm sure all these developers talked to each other and helped.
They all worked very closely together, and the Chathams, the Isaksons, the Cowarts, they all were very, very powerful in their own right, but they did not allow their egos to get in front of what they were trying to do. And when I first heard of Alpharetta, it was a quarter-horse capital of the world.
Yeah, things have changed.
Yes, they have.
But I am glad that the location ended up being where it's at. It is a beautiful campus. it ended up being right there on the Greenway. So folks that are running on the Greenway, or they can park over at the Y and hop on the trail. And we are in full swing of summer camp right now.
We are in
Jimmy,
full
what's
swing.
what's the latest over there at camp? How are they doing over there?
There were about 460 kids all around the Y because it was raining the other day, and it's joy to see all the kids in for camp. They're doing gymnastics. They're doing rock climbing. I mean, you name it, they're doing it.
Archery.
Yeah.
There's a mean tetherball game going on all the time over there.
The ropes course, and they're all through the woods. And I remember last year they came in. The kids came running into the office, and they had gotten a big terrapin, a big snapping turtle out of the one of the ponds down there. And they were afraid it was going to bite one of the kids, so they brought it in, and we took it down to the Chattahoochee Nature Center.
Okay.
And that's one of the great camps too, is we partner with the Chattahoochee Nature Center, and it's they get to learn all about wildlife and everything. But it's always something going on. The STEM camp that they have where they build robots and
Which is a relatively new feature of camp.
it is. And it's amazing to watch those kids build those things, and they control them with iPads. And to watch the joy on their face when they're doing that is just spectacular. I mean, it's great.
And again, much like after school program, if a child cannot, if his or her family cannot afford to go to camp, we make sure that one way or another they get to camp.
That's exactly right.
And that's what a lot of the dollars go towards are programs like that. And again, like you mentioned with after school, there are kids who would be at home by themselves if not for the YMCA camp program.
And we also have a number of great senior programs that are going on. We usually have something once a month, some kind of lecture or seminar, lunch and learn, or even just taking field trips. I know we took a trip down to Mercedes-Benz, toured Mercedes-Benz, and went to the Atlanta History Center, and always doing something. We try to keep the seniors as active as we do the youth, and it's just fun.
There really is something for everybody. And Jimmy, I know you are very familiar with the Lionheart kids.
I am.
You want to touch on that a little bit
Yeah,
too?
that's been. You can ask why stories. That's one of my big why stories. Is 5 years ago, after we started the radio station, Heather Wagner with Lionheart came to me and she said, "Would you mind letting the kids come in the radio station with you and just watch?"
And for those who don't know, Lionheart, these are kids with some sort of difficulty,
Right.
physical or mental.
Right, mostly autistic.
Right.
But yeah,
Physically challenged children.
physically challenged. And I said, no, let's get them on the air, and let's start. And that's exactly what we did. We started 5 years ago, and I've still got 5 kids that come on the air every Wednesday. And one of them, I have to brag on a couple of them. Vance, his mother came to me and she said, I'm not sure about this because Vance never really talked until he was about 6 years old, and he's got some other difficulties that go along with the other, but I can't shut him up now. He does his own sports show, and he comes in, he's fully researched. You can ask Vance who the starting lineup for the Boston Red Sox were in 1937. He'll tell you the whole lineup, what their batting average was. I mean, it's just amazing. Then there's another young lady named Jessie that is got more personality than you could ever imagine. And she is such a delight. We're going to give her her own 30-minute show called the Jessie Show. And she's going to talk about current events and what's going on with the Y. And then also she loves to give music trivia and play music. And it's such a joy. That's really one of my joys. And working with all 5 of them, really. All of them are great. And it's...
You can't help but pick up on some of that when you're talking to these kids about being on the radio and working with Jimmy. I mean, just their sheer just passion and joy doing their shows just rubs off on you.
I'm sitting here looking at Jimmy. He just got $500,000 in psychic income.
I agree.
It's
I think
more
he
than
did.
that. It's more than that. I love working with my kids, and I love going to the school. I from time to time go over and we teach music classes, music appreciation. And, I love being a part of the Lionheart program through the Y, and listening to the kids on the radio, which we broadcast on Facebook, by the way. All you have to do is go to the YMCA radio of Metro Atlanta, and you can find it, Y Radio. And they're on every Wednesday. We broadcast it live on the Facebook page. And then we share them, and they're there. You can go and see them, and just look at the joy in their face. These are kids that they didn't think this would actually work, and it works fantastic. They love it. They know they're communicating with 40 or 50,000 people every day.
Yeah.
And
They're famous.
yeah,
That's great.
Vance
wonderful.
Vance is working over at one of his other jobs. Is he works for the Gwinnett Stripers, taking up tickets. And I asked him how many people have come and asked for his autograph.
I hope your listeners and those that can view this can feel, see, and hear the excitement in this man's voice. Jimmy has just done a phenomenal job out there.
Thank you, Elwyn.
We
It's-
thank him so much, Dan Powell so much,
Absolutely.
for asking him to leave Tifton and come to Roswell, Alpharetta, North Fulton.
Oh, thank
You have
you.
been such an asset.
Thank you very much.
That was our first leader, really, other than Kathy Davis, who was with the YMCA down at Ashford Dunwoody. She was temporarily giving us some program direction and some guidance in how we should do different things as we got formed. And Dan was the first one hired on for the YMCA.
I was
here.
going to ask you guys if you could expand a little bit on who Dan Pyle is and his legacy with the Y, because since coming on board in 2013, I have heard his name mentioned a number of times. I have met him and got to know him a little bit. He knows my parents a little bit better, but could you just expand on who Dan is? And
Well, I'll kind of start a little
Go
bit,
ahead.
and you guys can jump in. When I first met Dan, he was just a young whippersnapper, but he was full of energy, and he had great programs. And I remember sitting in our little windowless office there at Fulton Federal Savings and Loan, and he says, "What are your plans for the YMCA for North Fulton?" Now, at the time, we didn't know whether to call it the Roswell Y, the Alpharetta Y, the North Fulton Y. We just knew we were a YMCA. And how do you plan to raise money? And and I'm just looking at him like, I'm just trying to get through day to day, Dan, right now. With going out and tried to recruit places to hold meetings, and he just kind of sat back and kind of smiled. He says, "We're going to have some fun with this. We're going to do well." Dan, he started out at this level and he ended at this level, and I never saw him have mood swings. I never saw him get rattled. He always, I guess it was because he's an ordained minister also. He had a
is he really? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah,
He's ordained Methodist minister.
yeah, just a real super
It doesn't
guy.
surprise me at all, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things, he didn't put that out there, but you could tell by talking to him, that man's had some training. He has the capability of working with all sorts of people, all sorts of type A's, and there were a lot of those up here. And I think Roger mentioned it, and I wholeheartly agree. You can do more together than you can individually. If you don't mind who gets the job done, it
Takes the
doesn't matter
credit.
who gets
Yeah.
the credit. You're not looking for it.
We can do more than me.
That's correct.
Dan was like we said, he was ordained Methodist minister, but he was a chaplain for one of the Ys. And he was doing so much work with the Y that the church told him that he needed to make a choice. And he said, "That's an easy choice. I can get more done for the Lord with the Y than I can by being a minister of a church." And that speaks volumes of Dan Powell. One of the finest men I've ever met. He's now the CEO of the Birmingham Y. And I hated to lose him. But Dan and I are big buddies and always will be. But I just I hate that he's gone. But I know that the work he's doing in Birmingham is incredible.
Well, the groundwork he laid here. Dan Powell, if you're listening to this or watching this, we love you, man. We couldn't have done it without you.
I first met Dan, and when he told me he was a ordained minister, and I told him, I said, I'm also a man of strong faith. I'm far from being an ordained minister, but I'm a man of strong faith. And that started our relationship. And I watched him. And because of his faith, he kept that constant. He didn't zig, he didn't zag, he didn't go up, he didn't go down, because he continually moved forward. And he told me a little story. I said, you know, Dan, you're something special. He said, I'm just along for the ride. I said, beg your pardon? He said, I'm sitting in the back seat enjoying the view, but God's driving the car. I said, what? He says, God's driving the car. He knows where you're going, when you're going to get back, if you're going to have any trouble getting there or coming home. So, Roger, just sit back and enjoy the view. I have never forgotten that, and I have told that probably 13 million times, and every time I tell it, somebody says, that's really something special. So that was Dan Powell.
I want to give some props while we're talking about Dan. Dan was a Roswell Rotarian, along with Elwyn and Roger. But the number of Rotarians from Roswell that were involved in the early stages was tremendous. I think we've got a list of about 35, 40 people
Yes, I think it's about close to 40 people.
that were actually involved in the formation of the North Fulton Y. And that's why I want Roswell involved in what we're doing.
Well, and I want to bring this maybe full circle and talk about maybe kind of the current state of the Alpharetta Y. And we were talking just before the show about trying to pinpoint exactly the date that the brick and mortar building went up, and we think it was 2001, 2002. And we saw a major renovation not too long after in the teen center.
Right.
And we're actually at sort of a new phase.
We are.
And being the chairman of the board, I'm involved in some of these discussions and really just try to stay in the loop as much as I can. But Alpharetta floated a parks bond a couple of years ago, and part of that money that was approved is going to a new expansion of the campus, and there will be some synergies with the city of Alpharetta, and there will be some event space, and we're really excited about that.
It's going to be a great community center where people can congregate for meetings or activities or whatever. And I can't think of a better place to do it,
Absolutely. Yeah, and
particularly with the atmosphere there.
And I want to kind of end it on this with, I'd like to ask you guys, because you have been involved in this process, you know, Elwyn especially from the beginning, what it's like to see this organization grow and flourish. What do you look back on with the most pride, and maybe what do you hope to see with the organization going forward?
Sure. The most pride is the buy-in from the community. Once we put the information out there, people ran with it. And you never knew who you were going to touch when you went to this PTA meeting, or you went to this board meeting and presented it to the bank or to the local activities, whether it might be the school system, because we did rent some property from the schools, Fulton County schools, to do things. And to sit down with those people, the men and women that were involved with those organizations, they had to have a buy-in. They could have turned us away and said no. You know, Roswell didn't turn us away. Alpharetta didn't turn us away. Roswell is starting to give us a little monetary help here as we're moving forward. That's a good thing, but I think we've kind of lost touch with our birth area, which was in Roswell and Roswell Rotary. and we want to make sure that comes to fruition again. It can. I think it was just had fallen off the radar. There was so much going on in people's lives that things were changing that this kind of fell behind the scenes. It's kind of like churches right now. Sunday's another day. Sunday is just another day. It used to be Sunday, that was a family day. You went to church, you went to dinner, you had all these things. Now there are activities, soccer games, lacrosse, whatever, 10 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning on Sunday mornings instead of being in church. I don't say that's good or that's bad. People have choices, and we all have that choice to make with our families. And I think the YMCA gives you plenty of choices, and I think they're all good choices that you can get from the Y.
Wonderful. Jimmy?
One of the things that excites me is the diversity I see. We have people from all over the world that are members of our Y, and I have the pleasure now of being director on duty, which I love. I've always loved doing that, but it means I stay late, and I get to meet everybody that comes in the door, every single person. And I've made friends with, I have a really good new friend from India that comes over twice a year to visit his children. And he's a Rotarian, and he's been to Rotary with me. But, I mean, there are people from Pakistan and parts of Europe that you wouldn't imagine, from Africa. And it's a diverse place where people can come and get to know each other and understand each other's cultures. And that is humongous. I mean, it's bridging the gap of communication. That's one of the beauties of what we do. And
sometimes that's hard for a community to find.
it is. And the Y is the perfect place to do that. And we accept everybody. Nobody's turned away. And that's the beauty of the YMCA.
I love that. Roger, any parting thoughts for us?
Well, the beauty of the YMCA, as I see it, is judge ye not that ye not be judged.
Exactly.
And you look at those young kids over there. They don't care whether you're Pakistan, Indian, rural, urban, black, white. You're just your buddy. You're a friend. And you've got a place you can go and make those friendships and make that. I think we need to reach out a little more into the Johns Creek area and the city of Milton, more specifically Johns Creek, because that area has really grown and they've got great leadership over there now. And I think they would like to be more involved with our Y than they are. And you mentioned the Indian and the Pakistan and some of the others. There's a large composite of foreigners or people from other lands in that area, and they want to be part of the community. But I just thank you so much, Hans, for doing this today. This was just great. And you and your family have been a staple in this community. I am very, very fond of your mom and dad. And I can say that because I've known Hans since he was a little boy.
Probably saw me running around the teen center at some
I saw
point.
you run around the teen center. And so thank you all. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Elwyn.
Thank you, Roger.
Because what you guys have done and what you're doing, Jimmy, is so, so meaningful to this community.
Thank you, Roger.
And the young people that you're helping mold today will be our leaders tomorrow. So we want them to grow up in a healthy environment.
I want to I'll wrap on just a quick story, echoing the sentiments of the diversity you see at the Alpharetta YMCA. My 4-year-old, again, learned how to swim over at the Alpharetta Y, and she was taking swim lessons. And I think there were 5 other people in her class, and not 2 of them had the same skin color. Yeah. And we hear a lot about diversity for diversity's sake and what the value is in that. And it's just, for her, it was good for her soul. And, she will grow up having a better understanding and appreciation for the value of just good people and how they treat you because of the Alpharetta YMCA. So I'm very proud of that for our why. And do appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to come tell a little bit about your why story. If you are listening to this show and would like to hear more or be a part of your why and give to your why, a good starting place, ymcaatlanta.org. We talked very specifically about the Alpharetta Y here, but more than likely there's a YMCA in your community, and we encourage you to find out more about that and to get more involved.
And listen to Y Radio.
And listen to Y Radio.
YMCAAtlanta.org/radio.
I think that's a good note to end it on behalf of Elwyn, Jimmy, and Roger. This is Hans Zappen signing off. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us. It helps other people find the show. And thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Guys, that was excellent.
Good job.
Wow.
That was
Nicely
excellent.
done.